So, good evening, colleagues, distinguished guests and friends. On behalf of the European Surgical Fellows Network, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to this networking event and the inauguration of the European Surgical Fellows Network at this historic old anatomy lecture theatre in the Trinity College Dublin. Tonight marks the beginning of our new chapter and a vision across Europe. We're here to celebrate the launch of a network which we believe that will shape the future of surgery. And also your presence here signals to the strength of our community. Thank you for being here with us tonight. It is my great honor to invite at stage Professor Daniel Casanova. Professor Casanova is not only a distinguished surgeon, but also a leader in European surgery. Serving as the president of the UEMS Section of Surgery, his dedication to advancing our profession and his commitment to supporting the next generation of surgical fellows is unparalleled. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Professor Casanova to the stage.
Good evening. I am Daniel Casanova, Professor of Surgery in the University of Cantabria in Santander in the north of Spain, and at this time President of the Section of Surgery of the UMS. And I would like to express my gratitude on behalf of the Section of Surgery to Dr. Muhammad Umair and Professor Paul Ridgway for the invitation to participate in this inaugural event of the European Surgical Fellows Network. It is an honor to collaborate with this group who represent the future of surgery and the UMS. In this presentation, I would like to discuss some of the challenges you will face in becoming the future leaders in surgery. I will talk about surgery, about the landscape and the surgical environment, about the competences for the surgical leadership and the role of leadership in shaping surgery. Surgery is not just technique, it's also character and commitment in the face of complexity. The way to be excellent in surgery is not easy for any of us, but there is no doubt that with hard work and determination, any goal can achieve. In my opinion, surgery is the highest art and science of medicine, for it is practiced with the mind, with the hand, with the heart, and with the soul. And why surgery is an exceptional profession? Because intellectually the knowledge in surgery is endless, technically it's very demanding to develop the necessary skills, it demands from the surgeon a continuous exercise of mental control, and it makes us guarantor of the life and health of the patients, and it's necessary to be very important spirit of generosity, innovation, and motivation, because, for example, in surgery, all those who make important discovery through their research will publish them for the benefit of everyone, for the benefit of the patient, while in the industry, every discovery is immediately patented in order to obtain the economic benefits. Surgeons trying to learn personally all the innovation that appear at the cost of learning curves that are often very complex. That is why there is no other profession in such a high individual demand to be competitive, since the most important prognostic factor in surgery is the surgeon. And this is very clear in this editorial in British Medical Journal years ago from Professor Sir David Carter from the University of Edinburgh, emphasizing how much the importance the surgeon in the result of the surgery. The acquisition of surgical skills is a complex and multifactorial process that requires enormous body of didactic information and knowledge, but also years of practical training and experience. For this reason, knowledge, experience, judgment, and skill are essential aspects of surgery. At this time, surgery that is in constant evolution is currently at a historic moment where scientific advance, technological innovation, and social challenges are redefining the medical practice. Because surgery is not limited to the technical mastery, it involves vision, adaptability, ethics, and commitment to the continuous improvement of patient care. Understanding the current landscape and future trend is not optional. It's a strategic necessity for any surgeon who aspires to lead and transform their specialty. What about the landscape? The new leaders of tomorrow will have to navigate a surgical environment marked by technological information, for example, robotic surgery, artificial intelligence, advanced simulation, 3D printing, minimal invasive surgery, and augmented reality, and also the globalization of knowledge, because there are now international exchange of protocol, standard and practice guidelines. The concept of the values-based medicine, focus on clinical outcome, quality, and the sustainability of the healthcare system, because many of them are interdependent. And about the outcome, remember the Clavian classification and the CCI, the Comprehensive Complication Index, or more recently our 7 project, Surgical Expertise Validity Evaluation. And also the safety for the patient-centered care, respect for safety, patient experience, and active participation in the surgical process. Patient-reported outcome measure, PROM, and patient-reported experience measure, PREM. Also, finally, demographic and epidemiological challenge, because in Europe we have very aging population, and this has a significant impact on the healthcare. Aging population, chronic disease, trauma, emergency surgery, in increasingly complex contexts. What about the competences for surgical leadership? To navigate this landscape, the future surgical leaders must develop, first of all, strategic vision, because need to be anticipate and prepare them for change. And I remember the sentence of Charles Kettering, one of the founders of Memorial Hospital Cancer Center in New York. The world has changed, yet is the only thing that has brought progress. This is an important sentence. Also, competences for surgical leadership is important to be technological excellent and management skills, because management high level of skill and scientific updating, and also it's important to lead multidisciplinary teams in the operating room, in the hospital, in the university, optimizing resource and managing complex environments. Also, the communication, effective communication is very important with colleagues, patient, institution, and society. And I remember the very nice protocol that had for many years the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh, with this protocol of non-technical skill that I used also for many years with the students in the medical school and with the residents in the hospital. Also, the important is the adaptability, the innovation and adaptability of the new innovation, integrating the new technologies safely and ethically, because it's the difference between technology or technology. No, the last advance are always the best. The patient must always be placed in the center of the problem in order to provide them with all the benefits of the new technology. Finally, the mentorship, because mentorship is very important for the training and guiding the new generation of surgeons, and also could be on-site or telementoring or remote mentoring, facilitating the telecommunication of the technology in which an expert, that is a mentor, provides guidance to a less experienced learner, a mentee, from a remote location doing real-time surgical procedures, because telementoring increases both quality and access to the surgical care. The role of the leadership in shaping surgery is important, and the new leaders need to be and adopt, implement innovation without losing the essence of doctor-patient relationship. Also, to promote surgical education in the team with international standard and continuous training. And also the importance of the translational and clinical research, and advocate for the role of surgery in the global health agenda. I have for years an experience doing some surgical campaigns in the coast of Kenya, close to Somalia, and I realized how is the important surgery in this situation, because surgery is affordable, save lives, and promote economic growth. Understanding the surgical landscape is the compass that we allow future leaders to successfully navigate a sea of change. And the question is, the profession is involved here, are we ready? And the combination of technical excellence, global vision, and ethical commitment will be key to ensuring that surgery continues to be a pillar of health, innovation, and hope for the society. What is the best way to identify and promote the new generation of European surgical leaders? In my opinion, through the UEMS. UEMS is more than 60 years old, but is a unified voice in the international representation of medical specialists, is effective interaction and support between National Medical Association and the UEMS, and between individual specialties and the UEMS, and also the development of new harmonized models for the training of the new generation of medical specialists and of high standard of clinical practice and improve care for patients through Europe. What is the structure of the UEMS? The links and relation with the European institution, for example, the Commission and Parliament and the other independent European medical organization, and the European Medical Scientific Society, that is the base of the UEMS. And the pillars are postgraduate medical training, continual medical education, and high-quality healthcare. The main objective of the UEMS is because the first statute emphasized the role of the UEMS in promoting the highest quality of care and the training of medical specialists in Europe for the benefit of the health of the patient in all Europe. But the main activity is convincing the European Commission that healthcare requires a directive establishing comparable high standards of medical training in the member state, because free movement was conditional of mutual recognition of qualification. And what about the mission of the sections? To define the European medical standard in specialty lists, European training requirement, and the accreditation at the European level, the European Accreditation Council for Continual Medical Education, and at this time the credits of Europe are similar to the credits of the American Medical Association, and respect our responsibility in the section of surgery to assist each and every European surgeon on his or her professional career by providing through UEMS, in collaboration with the National Surgical Association, the tools for the professional advancement. Really, the institutional commitment is facilitated to the fellows in shaping surgery standard with the UEMS, because UEMS support the European Surgical Fellows Network and his vision to empower the young leaders. The section of surgery is made with several divisions and working groups. At this time there are 12 surgical divisions of surgery, because with the incorporation recently the minimal invasive surgery and abdominal wall surgery, and there are several focus groups and there are collaboration with other sections of the UEMS. The idea, our mission is to build a community. We are creating a space where European surgical fellows can connect, collaborate, and lead. Through this community, we build professional friendship, inspire cross-border projects, and redefine what it means to be a surgeon today in the interconnected world. For this reason, the collaboration between all specialties is necessary, and the concepts of mentoring and leadership. We need to cultivate the potential of trainings and equip them with the tools and mentorship to thrive a changing world. For the reason, the concept of leadership and fellowship is substantial in this situation. And European Surgical Fellows Network bring together surgical fellows to will carry our professional forward. Their innovation and diversity are our strength. The objective is to empower the next generation and European surgeons. And what is the way? At this time, why we change, how we change, and what we change. To find the results, we need to develop in the strategic direction, creating recommendation for change, and implementing the recommendation. And this year is crucial to start and to change with this European Surgical Fellows Network. Finally, the message for the future is call to action. join the European Surgical Fellows Network movement, shape the future of surgery in Europe, and lead, collaborate, and inspire. And the receipt is convert idealism into action. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Casanova, for an inspiring talk and your unwavering support for the ESFN. Now, it's my privilege as the chair for ESFN to give us the vision of the network. And I'm just going to talk to you briefly about what this network is and what it means to us. So today, as surgical fellows across Europe, we face a problem. We are brilliant, we are enthusiastic, we are ambitious, we're driven, but we are fragmented, we're isolated, and we're disconnected as a community. So we train well, and we innovate locally. We are leading nationally in different areas, but collaboration stops at borders. And when borders limit us, the opportunities are missed. So there is something missing. What is missing is a connection. What is missing is a community. And most importantly, a place where fellows don't just train, they grow, they mentor, and they lead together. That's why we created the European Surgical Fellows Network. Not an organization, not another committee, not just a board. It is a movement, and it is a bridge across Europe. Our vision is very clear. A Europe where surgical fellows stand united, where we shape the standards, driving leadership, mentoring the next generation of surgical leaders. This is a community which is grounded by excellence, by mentorship, by leadership, and innovation. One that embraces the future of surgical practice. Our goals are very simple, yet bold. Mentorship hubs across Europe, academic publishing collectively, and cross-border fellowships or collaborations where we can grow. Leadership training, not just to operate, but to influence and inspire the next generation. We're investing in education that goes beyond borders. Webinars, courses, training, all that is led by experts and all tailored to what the fellows really need. And research is our cornerstone. We will launch projects that will redefine practices, projects led by fellows, powered by collaboration, and published across the world. Now, whether you are early in your career or whether you are a senior leader nationally or locally, there is always a place for you in the European Surgical Fellows Network. This is grassroots movement, and you can lead exceptional individuals already making an impact in their surgical practices and education. So join us, shape the future of surgery in Europe, lead, collaborate, and inspire the next generation. We're not just talking, we're acting. Soon, we will be announcing new positions, key positions opening up in the ESFN for fellows who want to join and lead, new research projects already in motion, and a symbol of your unity, our shared vision, and our fellows. So this is only a beginning. And again, as I said, this is not just a network. This is a future of surgery across Europe. And together, we will make it happen. So with this note, I would like to thank you all for joining in. Now, next. Once again, thank you all for joining in. Now, allow me to share that I would like to invite, as we move on to the keynote speaker, it would be my honor and my personal privilege to invite Professor Ridgway to the podium to introduce our next speaker. But for me, it has been much more than that. From the earliest stages of the development of this concept and planning, and the reason why I stand here in confidence talking with you all is this man, Professor Paul Ridgway, and his dedication to this network. So with great pride and gratitude, I invite him to introduce the keynote speaker.
So after that fantastic introduction, can you help me? So for those online, you're very welcome. You're missing a wonderful evening in a lovely lecture theatre. And the nice bit about this is we're all going for dinner soon. You were all invited, but unfortunately we'll have to eat on your behalf. I want to congratulate Umair in putting this all together along with Daniel and the supports that are there. And I think that's what we will take home from tonight. But a few months ago, when Umair was putting this all together, he rang me and said, who do we invite to do the keynote? And that was a very quick conversation. After 4 decades of professor of psychology in RCSI, finally RCSI signed his release papers. Professor Ciarán O'Boyle, who I've known for now a long time, Ciarán, it's a great honor and a great personal pleasure to invite you here tonight to speak as our keynote speaker in this network. You might say, why bring a professor of psychology? Is there something in your past, Paul, that you need to tell us all? And that's for another night and perhaps after dinner. But Professor O'Boyle's own personal history is one of great interest. He became professor of psychology in RCSI back in the 80s. And that's when psychology in training in medical students wasn't well known. Human factors was a luxury that was not as yet discovered in the majority of mainstream medicine. Despite being professor of psychology, he also decided in his early years to set up the Institute of Leadership, an institute in RCSI that still is alive and kicking today and has multiple international offices and offers MSc courses in leadership and has really been a huge success story. And even as he reached the end of his time in RCSI, he decided that actually that one institute wasn't enough. And he fathered yet another institute in the Institute of Positive Healthcare, which is also still going strength to strength since he's left. Personally, Professor O'Boyle shaped my surgical life as he shaped so many other surgeons. He shaped it in a way that continues to pay back. And actually, my own research project in performance in surgical performance, he's very kindly acted as externs on some of my PhD students. And he spawned that interest well back in the 1990s. Going back to the conversation that I had with Umair those many months ago, it was very clear that what we needed for this night was that we needed someone who knew surgeons, who knew surgical training, but also that he had an expert knowledge in the evolution of surgeons, not only just as technical practitioners, but also as thoughtful leaders in healthcare. Professor O'Boyle was first, second, and third on that list. Barack Obama was fourth, but he's not here till next week. So at that note, I invite Professor O'Boyle up to give the keynote tonight, and I thank you very much, Ciarán.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for that, Paul, and thank you, Umair, for super organization. So I'm going to talk about two different themes. I'm going to talk about leadership, and this is my favorite quote on leadership, which is, I think you'd probably agree, pretty topical at the moment. I wonder whether the world is being run by smart people who are putting us on, or by imbeciles, fools who really mean it. So we'll have that as one theme. And then my second theme will be on personal well-being and personal effectiveness. This is the great English psychiatrist, R.D. Laing, who said, life is a sexually transmitted disease with 100% mortality and inevitable intermittent periods of morbidity. So we hope we'll have a more positive kind of view of life and living when we get to the end of this. So let's start by talking about a psychologist's perspective on leadership. We heard a lot about the importance of leadership. I'm going to focus more on the interpersonal aspects of leadership. This is the great Irish writer Oscar Wilde. And he said, really, our leadership should be authentic. We should be authentic. Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. And we could have some very interesting conversations later about what it's like, and I'm experiencing now, when you retire and you take off that professional carapace, that professional, and what is left? How does that emerge? What's the self that's there? So I'll be taking a fairly psychological line on this, but I also want to bring you some practical follow-throughs from what the theory says. And I've pulled two or three of the most practical things I think we can use and perhaps teach in the development of surgeons. So we don't have time to get into this question in detail of whether leaders are born or whether leaders can be made. But when we set up the Institute of Leadership in our CSI in 2005, we had hundreds of people coming through the doors, doctors, nurses, various healthcare professionals. The biggest barrier to their leadership development was that they had a very fixed idea in their heads about what leadership actually is. Mostly, they saw leadership as something where there's a leader, the focus is on the leader, who knows what to do, and everyone else's job is to follow along. And yes, that is one kind of leadership. And it's important to a degree, but there are other important dimensions to leadership, and that's what we'll go into now. So this very complex looking slide, it's not as bad as it looks, is a distillation by Bernard Bass and Bruce Avolio of hundreds of thousands of research papers on leadership. This is a massive area of research. And I'll just bring you through this because there are some important lessons for us in healthcare from this. The horizontal axis here represents the extent to which somebody in a leadership role is passive or active. The vertical axis represents the extent to which the leader is ineffective or effective. And if you can imagine another axis running through, it's the effect of the leader's behavior on followers. And we see here that there are a number of different ways of leading represented by these different colored boxes. So in the bottom left, we've laissez-faire leadership. This is where somebody is given the leadership position, but doesn't pick it up. They don't take responsibility for their people or for their team. They're not there when decisions are needed. They don't take on the responsibility. So you can see the leader is being passive and the style of leadership is ineffective. We come to the next two boxes a little bit further along, a little bit more effective, called MBE, A and P. MBE stands for Management by Exception. These are people who think that leadership is really about catching mistakes. And they do it in two ways. If they're passive, they wait for mistakes to happen and they pounce onto the follower. Or if they're active, they micromanage the person following so that no mistakes will be made. Is that important? Well, of course it is in certain circumstances. The problem for followers of people whose only way of leading is that they never get any positive reinforcement. The only time they're spoken to really is when they make mistakes. They're managed on the basis of the exceptions, the mistakes that they made. And it's very, very common, this kind of leadership, especially in healthcare. You can see it's effective to a degree. The leader is being more active, but the orientation is very negative. The orientation is towards the errors. We come to the next one, the green box there, which is contingent reward. This is beloved of human resources departments, where we work out performance metrics, we agree certain performance indicators, and we work with those, and there's various rewards set up like that based on whether the person meets the goals or not. And that's fine. Leader's a bit more interactive, it's a bit more effective. Pretty much that's it in a lot of organizations. That's what we see when we look for leadership. Now, what about these blue boxes way up here on the right, where the leader is very active? It's very effective type of leadership based on a vast body of research, and it has a very profound effect on people. What kind of leadership is that? In the literature and in training and development, it's called transformational leadership. The idea is that what the leader is doing is transforming the follower to being the best that he or she can be. The other types of leadership are called transactional. I'm not saying they're not important, but we're saying that it's a different mindset. So what are transformational leaders like? And I think this goes back to looking at what kinds of leadership we need at an interpersonal level rather than at a strategic level in the development of professions. Well, if you look to the left there, I'm showing you on that side the kinds of characteristics of transformational leaders. They build trust. So trust is at the core of the leader-follower relationship here. They act with integrity. They have a moral compass, an ethical approach. They can inspire others. They can tell a good story. They encourage innovative thinking. They don't feel challenged if somebody comes up. If the most junior person comes up with a good idea, they'll accept that and also give credit to the person who's come up with the idea. And I think you can summarize that type of leadership as a kind of coaching approach to leadership. Now, clearly we move through these different layers, but what the research basically says that if we look at leadership in terms of its impact on the people being led, transformational leadership is incredibly effective. Who would not want to be led by somebody who is trustworthy, is inspiring, who listens, who encourages them, and who generally coaches them? That's the model of leadership that we know works. So I think the challenge in all organizations, whether healthcare or otherwise, is to see more of that kind of leadership and less of the transactional leadership. To be that kind of leader, what are the characteristics we need in ourselves? Well, again, based on the research, there are 4 key dimensions. The first is knowing oneself. The oracle at Delphi, that was the answer to a lot of the questions. Know yourself. We can make these slides available if anybody would like to have them afterwards. So that's the first, knowing our strengths, weaknesses, our red lines. Doing the right thing, there's the question of integrity, ethics, moral behavior. Being genuine and compassionate. That's the authenticity. And then being fair-minded, balancing, analyzing relevant data, balancing the various sets of needs. Just in relation to doing the right thing, we had a very interesting experience on this about 10 years ago. We were working with COSEXA, College of Surgeons of East Central and Southern Africa, which the RCSI is one of the academic partners. And we were teaching some of this in Rwanda. And at the time we had set up the Institute of Leadership. And one of the surgeons, with 12 surgeons on the course, it was a train-the-trainer course, said to us, don't leave Kigali without visiting the Genocide Museum. So we went to the Genocide Museum, and if you've been there, there are just cases and cases of skulls, human skulls, machete marks on them, bits missing. There's a room full of photographs of children sent in by their families, all of whom were massacred with machetes. This was during the Rwandan genocide in 1994. And we got to thinking at that time that the Interahamwe, the youth militias who carried out those killings, were led. There was leadership there. They were trained. They were told to pick the people in their villages that they would massacre when the word came to start the genocide. There was leadership. We're seeing it now in various parts of the world. There's leadership in terms of its effectiveness, but it's not based on a moral or ethical foundation, which goes, and hence it's extremely dangerous. Leadership is such a powerful force in human relations. So I think that when we think about developing transformational and authentic leaders, mentoring in that context, I think the kinds of things we're thinking about is helping people learn from their own life story. I said the laboratory of leadership is one's autobiography. Becoming more self-aware, practicing values, building support teams, support networks like this, integrating our lives, being authentic across the boundaries, and empowering others to lead. These are the kinds of inputs that I think we need to make in our own development. When we were running the Institute of Leadership, we put about 4,500 health professionals went through that program with us in leadership development. And probably the most important for them, the most impactful single model that we used was this one. And if you're not familiar with the paper, I'm sure you'll be familiar with the concept. This was from a paper published in 1958 in the Harvard Business Review, first published in 1958. Now, I'll just explain it briefly and just think about your own leadership and your own leadership styles, your own leadership roles. Basically, what Tannenbaum and Schmidt said was this, that when we're leading others, and I'm thinking about direct leadership, there are two variables in play. The first is how much authority are we using? And the second is how much freedom of action is given to the person being led. You can see that somebody who leads here from the left, so directive on this side, uses a great deal of authority and gives very little freedom of action. And you can see how in certain circumstances it's appropriate. It's a command and control approach to leadership. Somebody who leads from the right is very supportive, gives a great deal of freedom of action to the person reporting in, and it's a very different style. So the question is, where should you be? And the answer, of course, is it depends. Of course, it depends. And that was the great insight by Tannenbaum and Schmidt. The arrow here on the bottom is key. You choose where to be depending on three things. The people being led, the situation that you're in, and your own natural orientation as a leader, an understanding of that. So the question now becomes not what is my style of leadership or what is my approach to leadership. The question now becomes, in this situation, with this group of people, knowing what my normal orientation is, where should I choose to be in this situation? And participants on programs found that to be one of the most helpful, practical models. And I know quite a number of people who put this up in their offices and, up in wardrooms and so on. So there's an example of how we can take some evidence-based thinking about leadership and apply it in practical terms that assists individuals to deal with the stresses that are inherent in taking on leadership roles. So that's leadership. Let me now just turn to this idea of thriving and being well and maintaining our own well-being. This is the great artist Vincent van Gogh, who once said, "I put my heart and soul into my work and have lost my mind in the process." So for the future of surgery, this is not really what we want to see. We do not want to see people burning out. We don't want to see them putting their hearts and souls into their work to the extent that they lose their minds in the process. So I'm just going to pull out 2 or 3 ideas. There are many of these. We could spend a week on it. I'm just going to pull out a few ideas that I think might be helpful in thinking about this. The first is the very rapid emerging development of the specialty of lifestyle medicine and the evidence base that's now appearing to underpin interventions that we ourselves can take and that systems can take to maximize and improve health. This is from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, a really excellent organization, very strong focus on an evidence base. And they have usefully just pulled these various factors together into 6 key factors in lifestyle medicine. You'll be more familiar than I. Nutrition, physical activity, sleep, social connection, avoiding risky substances, and stress management. So I think the idea of helping people in their formations in the profession to develop and maintain their awareness of these factors and to work with these factors to improve their health and well-being is a very good starting point. Coming at it from a more psychological perspective, I just want to give you a flavor of 3 of these different ways of thinking: the growth mindset, the strengths mindset, and then the importance uncertainty mindset, as just 3 possible takeaways. Now, psychologists spend a great deal of time thinking about this, the idea that we create our own reality through our perceptual system, the ways we think. This is from the psychologist Richard Gregory. The senses do not give us a picture of the world directly, rather they provide evidence for the checking of hypotheses about what lies before us. This is Einstein. He said, "It's a nonsense to found a theory on observable facts alone. In reality, the very opposite happens. It's the theory which decides what we can observe." So the idea here is that the model of reality that we build is just that. It's a construct. It's a construct of reality, and each person's model is going to be different. So the rows and the fights and the conflicts are usually about different models of reality. This is the way I like to think about it. It's the Kipling notion of the 6 blind men looking at the elephant. What you see depends on what particular part of the equation or the system that you're actually looking at. So this idea that our perception of reality and reality are 2 different things permeates a great deal of the way into managing effectively the improvement of our wellness and well-being. And the same is true of this map called the self. We have a construct of who we are in ourselves. We were doing something recently in our CSI on working to help surgeons coming up to retirement to think about what that would be like. And are there specific challenges there compared to other disciplines or other professions? And one of the questions that brings up is the extent to which our professional identity is an intrinsic part of our self-image. Of course it is, but what else is within that image in addition to our professional identity? The poet David Whyte says, our conversations with ourselves involve three marriages: self, others, and work. If we choose one over the other two, we become impoverished. And I really like this quote. We make ourselves for our work, and then our work makes us. We train, we develop for our professions, but then our profession makes us to a very significant extent and to a very significant degree. But what that means, of course, is that we have the capacity to alter or to change the construct of ourselves that we have created. This is a great German poet, Rilke. He said, if we think of the existence of the individual, ourselves, as a larger or smaller room, it becomes clear that most people get to know only one corner of their room, a window seat or a strip of floor which they pace up and down. So that raises the question, how much more of ourselves is available to us once we start broadening out the way we're thinking, both about ourselves and also about reality. And here's Rilke again. We live a strange book wherein we advance line by line without having the right to read the next page before the wind has turned it. But we possess the privilege of returning to a passage we have read before and seeing it reappear before our eyes. And we do this especially when the wind has risen and a leaf has trembled under our fingers. So we live through each phase of our lives subjectively, but we can retrospectively look back on them more objectively. And within that is a great deal of learning and a great deal of development, the self-reflective dimension of professional education. The second thing that kind of comes out of this idea that we create reality is an idea that comes from positive psychology, which is a relatively new discipline. And that is that we humans have evolved to be much more sensitive to negative information, to negative stimuli, to negative inputs. Somebody gets a performance review, 95% of it is excellent, and there's 5% which is maybe areas for improvement. What's the bit that they spend their time thinking about? The 95% or the 5%? It's human nature. So one of the ways around this, and there's good evidence for this, is keeping a daily journal where we write down just 3 good things that happened during the day. If you do this for a week, it makes a difference because we start now overcoming a perceptual bias that we tend to have, which is to see the negatives. It's harder to see the positives. It's more easy to discount the positives than it is to discount the negatives. So these are examples coming from this idea of perception of construction. In terms of our well-being, there's really kind of emerging again, and I say again because Aristotle was talking about this over 2,000 years ago, exactly this idea that wellness, your well-being, your happiness. There's hedonic well-being, which is feeling good, maximizing pleasure, and so on. But there's eudaimonia, eudaimonic well-being, which is living a meaningful life, steeped in self-truth, self-responsibility, striving to excellence, realizing our potential. Health professionals have an advantage in this respect, I think, because the meaning is intrinsic to a much greater degree than it is in many other pursuits in life. So the focus then should really be on growth, on relatedness, on autonomy, on purpose, on environmental mastery, and on self-acceptance. What we tend to see in healthcare in relation to people struggling is a focus on stress management, employee assistance programs, and so on, that kind of approach, which focuses on the negative. This is a way of focusing on it in a very different way, on growth and development. And during COVID, a number of us got very interested in the Stoics, the Stoic philosophers. This is Epictetus. Again, there's nothing new. This is old wine in new bottles, is what psychology actually is. The chief task in life is to identify and separate matters so I can say clearly to myself which are externals, not under my control, and which have to do with the choices I actually control. Where then do I look for good and evil? Not to the uncontrollable externals, the uncontrollable externals, but within myself to the choices that are my own. So we're seeing the same kind of philosophical principle applying here. For those of you who run large teams or are involved in the development of others, probably the best thing to come out of positive psychology is this idea. Very well researched, very good evidence base. This is the idea of using our strengths, call our signature strengths. This is a research center in Cincinnati. It's philanthropically funded, outstanding, vast amount of research. They set out to find out what are the human strengths that exist right throughout all nations, all peoples, doesn't matter what the religious background is, social background and so on. And they identified 24 key strengths that humans have, 24. And these go to these values: wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence. So there's strengths like bravery, honesty, zest, learning, judgment, and so on. And the idea is all of us have these strengths to different degrees. If you go onto the website, you can do a detailed questionnaire which rank orders your strengths for you. And it, again, there's a lot of research evidence to show that if you know what your strengths are, your key strengths, and if you use them in relationships and work and leisure, your well-being increases dramatically. It also means a way of helping people in training and development to find out what their strengths are and use their strengths. And this is particularly important in relation to children. In Victoria and Australia, I've been in primary schools where children are now being educated about their strengths. They know all about their vulnerabilities. Their phones tell them that. The antidote to that, in large measure, is to start with children at 4 or 5 years of age and start to teach them about their strengths. The same is true of young doctors and nurses in training. They know what their vulnerabilities are. Question is, do they know what their strengths are? The final model that I will touch on briefly, again, going back to the people who went through our institute, which they found most useful, was this, which again is probably familiar, the Eisenhower matrix. The idea that when you're thinking about where you spend your time, there are 4 quadrants. Top quadrant number 1 is things that are urgent and important. There are things you have to do. Quadrant 3 is where you lose all your time doing things that are urgent but not important. Quadrant 4 is a complete time wasters. These are not urgent and not important. Quadrant 2 is where successful people spend quite a bit of their time doing things that are important but not urgent, like personal development, like strategic thinking, like investment in one's own health and well-being. Time doesn't allow us to go into this in any more detail. So finally, I'd like to focus on something that's been a bugbear for me for nearly 40 years, and that is the idea that the best way to deal with stress in the workplace is to actually make people more resilient. That's the usual approach. It's been the approach for the last 30, 40, 50 years. And there is something in that. There's a degree to which that is true. We need resilient people if they've got to function in stressful situations. The problem with that is that very often it lets organizations off the hook for creating organizations which support the development and the well-being of individuals. It puts the emphasis on the individual to adapt. Why should we teach people to adapt to a toxic environment rather than set out to change the toxic environment? This is from a major study from last year from the University of Singapore. They looked at 1,000 different companies operating throughout Asia. They measured a whole range of measures of organizational well-being and organizational performance right across the spectrum of industries. And you can see here, the size of the circle is the extent to which the particular variable influenced organizational well-being and organizational performance. What's the top one? The well-being of the leaders. By a mile, more than anything else. And you can see way down quite low is stress management training for individuals. So we really do have to get the message out that dealing with pressure in the workplace is only partly the responsibility of the individual. A huge amount of that is down to the culture that's created in the organization, and the culture is created by the leadership of the organization. So I spent a lot of time in private sector organizations who are investing heavily in this kind of thinking now. These are the conclusions from the Singapore study. The work well leaders impact. It demands a major shift in how we approach well-being in organizations. Now more than ever, well-being must transcend conventional HR initiatives. This is not about HR. This is about the culture of the organization. It's about all leadership. It must become a top-of-mind priority of leaders in every organization. Leaders must focus on their own well-being, put proper values into practice, and design systems that empower individuals to succeed personally and professionally. And if we want to see what the impact of that is in a really hard-nosed, hard-edged industry, this is from a major study done by Oxford and Harvard universities 2 years ago on firms in the United States. Nearly 1,800 publicly quoted firms. They were able to gather data on well-being in these firms from Indeed data collected by the Indeed organization. And that gave them an overall well-being score. And then they said, what would happen if we took $1,000, invested that in the top 100 companies in terms of the well-being of their workforces, and track that through over a couple of years, adjusting each year for movements within that. So what they're asking is, what is the effect on the financial success of the organization from having a workforce that's well? And you can see it outstripped every other indicator, S&P 500, the lot. So this is an investment strategy that's starting to emerge, saying that leadership in organizations that is focused on the well-being of the people within the organization, those organizations will actually thrive and do better. So in summary, what I'm proposing is that leadership can be developed, that transformational leadership works, that situational leadership is a useful paradigm, that the mind constructs reality, including the concept of self. And the beauty about that is that gives us ways to intervene, that growth mindset and a proactive approach is useful for thriving. We can use our strengths to improve our well-being. The importance urgency matrix is really important for time management. And really, it's not just about individuals. It's also about systems. And I think the Stoics knew a lot. Two final thoughts. This is Kabir, the 14th century Indian poet. And when you get to my age in life, these kinds of questions become more important, but they're important at all stages of life. If you don't break your ropes while you're alive, do you think ghosts will do it after? And my final quote is from the great French writer Marcel Proust. The only real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Boyle. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, as we come to the close for the ESFN, I would like to take a moment to reflect on the significance of this evening. And we've heard inspiring words from Professor Casanova and a powerful vision of the future of surgery in Europe, and an enlightening keynote lecture by Professor Ciarán O'Boyle on leadership. On behalf of the ESFN, I extend my dearest gratitude to our distinguished speakers and our guests, and especially Professor Paul Ridgway for his constant source of guidance, and more so for a belief in me about what we were trying to achieve from the day I spoke to him about this initiative and the guidance and support. And I will go back and reference Professor Ciarán O'Boyle's talk from the Smiths et al. Graph that he showed. I think I was in the hand, or I was led by someone who gave me the freedom of action to what I wanted to do. And this evening is only the beginning of what we hope we will be, and we will become a lasting community of collaboration and innovation in Europe. With this, I would like to formally conclude our session for tonight. And we will be in touch with all of you soon regarding the future initiatives and our plans, both academic and clinical. And we look forward to continuing this journey together. And I would like to thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you so much.